Have you ever wondered if it would be possible to create tasks in Clio Manage based on the completion status of another task? There are several useful use cases for such a scenario. The first one, for example, would be for quality assurance, QA, or reviews whenever a new member joins your firm. Whenever a new staff member joins and completes a task, another task would be created for their supervisor to check their work. Here's an example. We have this draft NDA task over here, which is assigned to Michael Johnson. Whenever this task is marked as completed, an automation will run in the background, and in just a second, if I refresh the page, we'll see that a review task has been created, review for Michael Johnson, and assigned to me as the manager. Another useful use case would be more dynamic and flexible tasks list. Now you'll say, Martin, Clio Manage already has task list. Sure, but there are a few important issues. First of all, and the biggest issue, is that all the due dates of the tasks will be based on the initial trigger date. If one task is delayed, you'll have to manually move all the following tasks to accommodate for the delay. Obviously, if it's just a few tasks in the list, that's not a problem. But if you have many more than that, that can be quite an issue. Additionally, all of the tasks are created from the get-go, meaning that potentially your employees may be overwhelmed with the amount of tasks that need to complete. Let's see an example of how this can be improved. We have this draft discovery request first task created over here. I'll mark it as complete. And again, in the background, an automation will run. Let's refresh the page. And a new task, submit discovery request, will be created with the due date of today. Now, once I complete this task and refresh the page, another task for a follow-up will be created, this time 30 days from the completion date of the previous task. Unlike normal tasks list, which would just be created from the get-go and it would be 30 days of whatever the due date of the previous task was and are not dynamic. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can build this for your firm together with a few templates for both Zapier and Make automation platforms. So let's get going. Hi, this is Martin from Automation for Lawyers. For over 3 years now, my team and I have been helping growing law firm owners make the best use of their legal tech tools, like Clio. We optimize practices so that your systems help free up the time of your attorneys and paralegals instead of slowing you down. Let's have a look at the first automation setup in Zapier, and this one will be for the QA function, i.e. whenever a specific team member completes a task, another task is created for their supervisor or for their manager to check their work. The setup here is quite simple. We just have 4 steps. First of all, the trigger is whenever task status is updated in Clio Manage. This will be triggered for all tasks. We'll then check if the status is equal to complete, i.e. the task has been completed. After that, we'll check for the right assignee, right? In this case, Michael Johnson, that's our new starter. And after that, if both of those conditions are met, we are going to create a task for the supervisor, which again will be absolutely dynamic, featuring the task name of the original task and whatever due date that you want to set. Let's click Edit Zap and actually see how this is set up. The trigger itself is very simple. We just have this trigger event of task status updated, and you just need to connect it to your Clio Manage account. That's really it. The second step over here is filter by Zapier, so it's an internal Zapier app. And the configuration, what we are doing is we are checking that the status coming from the trigger, right, of the task that has just been updated, exactly matches the word complete. That means that the task has been completed. We are then checking that the assignee is Michael Johnson. In this case, very simple, assignee name exactly matches Michael Johnson to be replaced by whatever employee you would want to be tracking. And finally, we are creating the task, which is a Clio Manage action. Action event is create a task. And then in the configuration, we are passing the name of the task from the first step, and then in brackets, review for and the assignee name. In description as well, you can modify it to whatever you want. In this case, I just put review completed task of, then assignee name, let's say Michael Johnson. We then need to choose to whom we'll be assigning this new task. In this case, you can choose either a user or a contact. In this case, we'll need the user. And then from the user list, you can select whatever user is the manager of that particular person and will be assigned a task. In the matter, we are choosing a custom value over here and then adding the matter ID of the matter of the original task. As for the task due date, we need to let the system know that it will be today as a due date. In this case, I'm using this internal Zapier value for central US time. You can look up more of these time zones over here in this list, so Eastern Standard Time, Central Daylight Time, etc. If you go to this blog article by Zapier, insert the time your Zap runs into a field. And then just paste this value over here. It will look something like this. If needed, you can also put the task priority. The task status will be pending. You can also choose to notify the assignee, notify the completion, and set it as status of limitations, yes or no. So that's really it. The cool thing as well about the setup with here in Zapier is that the trigger and then any of the internal steps by Zapier, these two over here, are not counted as tasks. So that means that only if the task matches the criteria and then another QA task is created, only then you'll spend a task from your credits, and will only be just one task as we are just creating this one action over here. So let's actually test it out. Just turn it on and then go into Zap Runs. Let's go to our test case over here, draft NDA. Let's mark it as complete. And usually it's pretty much instant. Just click refresh. As you can see, we have a success. All these filters have been passed. Any new task has been created. Let's go to Clio. There you go. Draft NDA review for Michael Johnson. Review completed task of Michael Johnson. Due date of today. Now, if we, for example, complete this one, right, and obviously now it doesn't match the criteria because it's assigned to me. Let's see what happens. And refresh. As you can see, it spent just 0 tasks, so no credit have been spent. It got triggered, right? It passed the first filter, but then it didn't pass the second filter because the assignee wasn't Michael Johnson in this case, and that means that the Zap hasn't continued. Now, if you're not techie, not to worry. I actually created templates for both the Zapier and make.com automations that I'll be showing in this video. The templates are completely free of charge. Setting them up on your account will just take a few minutes and will require minimal technical knowledge. If you want to get access to them, follow the link down below and join our free legal automation community on school.com. Apart from getting access to all the past and future templates, you'll also have the ability to ask my team and I any questions that you have about automation, and also be able to interact with other growing law firm owners interested in automation and legal tech. Let's now look at the second example, i.e. creating a list based on a task list. In here, the setup will be a bit more complex, but really following the same logic. The initial trigger will be the same, status task updated, task status updated. We'll then again check in if the status is equal to complete. If that's the case, we then have these branches over here with path in Zapier, where we'll essentially be checking the name of the task. Previously, we were checking the assignee. In this case, we're checking the name of the task. And so if the name of the task is, for example, draft discovery request, then we'll create the follow-up task for that. Once the follow-up task is created, i.e. submit discovery request, we'll then add a few days to today and then create a follow-up task in, for example, 30 days. Now, to make this work, what I recommend doing is still having task list. The task list itself, however, will just have one or very few initial tasks, which will then be triggering the creation of the follow-up task. What I also recommend doing is adding some kind of identifier to them that these were automated tasks, such as, for example, the square brackets over here, as you can see, just to make sure that this automation is not triggered by any manual tasks created by your team. And so how this is going to work is, if we're going to go into a matter, we're going to assign a task list. In the task list selection, we're going to select this discovery first task only. We're going to choose the assigner, and the way that the automation is set up, any follow-up task will also be assigned to whatever person that we choose over here. So let's choose myself over here. And then the trigger date this will just be for the first task, so it doesn't really matter. You see, we now have this new task creator over here, draft discovery request assigned to me. That's all cool. Let's now have a look at the setup of the Zap and then actually run it. So the first two steps are exactly the same as they were in the previous example. Again, just task status updated and then checking the status that it is complete. After that, we have added this path module, which you can find over here, path by Zapier. And then we have defined two branches for it. Now the conditions for these branches are defined over here in these modules over here. So if we click on it, choose custom rules, and then only continue if the name of the trigger task exactly matches draft discovery request. If that's the case, this branch will execute. In this case, we are creating another task. The name of the task is again following the square brackets as well. Submit discovery request. Description, you can assign it again to whatever you want. Type of assignee, user. In this case, we are dynamically assigning the user from the first step, right? So just choose over here custom and then add a variable over here. And if you look for assignee ID will be the user ID of the original task owner. Matter, same, matter ID from the first task. For the task due date, using the same logic as in the previous automation, the central US time over here, i.e. today's date. Again, you can choose task priority, task status, and notifications if needed. This will then create the follow-up task. Once the follow-up task is created, i.e. this submit discovery request, then we'll have this other branch will execute, right? So the name exactly matches submit discovery request. In this case, we actually want to create the next task in 30 days, right? In 30 days of the completion of the submit discovery request. How do we do that? We have this action by formatter by Zapier, again, an internal Zapier app. The only thing that we do here is we do a transformation of adding/subtracting time. The input will be today's date, i.e. the execution date, right? Again, central US time. And then in the expression, you can define what you want the range to be. So in this case, for example, plus 30 days. We are outputting it in a format of year, month, date. That is the format that Clio Manage system is expecting for the due date. And so at the output of this, we get something like this, right? So for example, today is 18th of September. We got here the 18th of October. After that, we are creating the task just as before. Follow up on discovery request status, description, user, matter, all the same. The only difference being that the task due date is now, instead of being the internal value of Zapier of today's date, it's now the output of this module over here, module number 7, with whatever we got from the calculation. Now, if any other tasks are completed that don't match this criteria, none of these branches will be executed, and you won't spend again any task because all of these over here are internal Zapier steps. So let's turn this on, go into Zapier runs, and actually check it out. So we have this draft discovery request that we just created, again, with the designation of a task list, the assignment of the task list. Let's mark it as complete. In just a moment, we can see that the Zapier has been executed successfully. As you can see, it followed this pass over here, this first pass over here. Task status updated, the status was complete, the task name matched draft discovery request, and so then the next task has been created. If we go back to Clio and refresh, we'll be able to see that the submit discovery request has been created for myself with the due date of today. Now, once we mark this one as complete, you can go back, let's refresh. It can take, again, a minute to execute. But there you go, we have the second task over here. This time, it has went down the second pass of submit discovery request, being the name of the task. It has calculated as the output over here plus 30 days from today's date, i.e. the 18th of October, and then created the task for that. So let's again go back and refresh. And there you go, follow up on discovery request. Just 30 days from today, 18th of October, assigned to me. Now moving on to the make.com automation. This one looks a bit different. The reason as well being that Make actually charges you for all the triggers as well. So whenever a task is completed that won't fit any of the criteria that we have defined, it will still count as one operation. The thing is, Make is much more cheap to run much cheaper to run compared to Zapier. So depending on your volume, you'll have better ROI in one or the other. But the way that's set up is just one central automation, which does both the QA and the task list. Whenever you'll be defining the webhook over here, you'll be able to click add. You'll be able to define the events that you want it to be triggered by, such as, for example, only when the task is created, updated, or deleted. So in this case, I just selected updated. In the expires add, you need to define when the webhook will expire. And that's a peculiarity of the Clio Manage API and the system. The maximum range that you can define over here is 30 days into the future. After that, you'll have to recreate the webhook. Now, fear not, there's actually a workaround it and a way of automatically updating all the webhooks so that they never expire. I'll be doing a video about that in the next few weeks, so stay tuned for that. That way you don't have to manually recreate them every time. So whenever task is updated, what we're going to be doing is we then have this router, which essentially what we'll do is it will route all the data that is coming from here to all of these different branches, and we'll check if the filter is met. If the filter is met, then it will execute the modules after this filter. All right. So for the first one, the first filter that we have over here is for QA for Michael Johnson, which we're checking is that the status of the task is again complete, and then the assignee name is Michael Johnson, right? First of all, the status, and then if you click into the assignee name is Michael Johnson. If both of those are true, then we are creating this review task. We're assigning it to, again, a specific user. For the name, we are using a similar structure as before as Zapier, description all the same. The due at is simply this now variable that you can define very easily if you click into it, into the input field, you go into the date selection over here, and then just click now. All right, it will add it to the input field. For the meta ID, we are then selecting the meta ID from the incoming webhook. Again, can set the priority if you want to the status, set your limitation, and also actually task type ID if you need that, and the time estimated, which is not possible with Zapier. So that's the setup for the QA. Then for the discovery, again, very similar, status equal to complete, and then the name of the task being, for example, draft discovery request. If that's the case, we will then create in the follow-up task. Very similar setup as before. And then for the follow-up, again, a bit simpler than in Zapier, because what we can do simply in here is in due at, we can use this add days function. We are then putting this now token that I've shown previously, and then just set in 30 as a second parameter over here. So it will add 30 days to the date of the execution. And then we don't need separate steps to calculate that. Otherwise, all the same. Again, the only difference will be in the assignee is assigned dynamically by turning on this map variable over here and then selecting the assignee ID coming from the webhook instead of it being static as in this first module over here. Now, as I mentioned before, I created free templates for these automations. You'll be able to get them for both Zapier, both the QA and the task list, and then for this one for make.com as well. You can access them by following the first link down below and joining our free legal tech community. Ask us, my team and I, any questions that you may have about automations and mingle with other law firm owners. I hope that you have enjoyed this episode. If you have any questions, please drop them down below in the comments or in our community, and have a fantastic day.